Greetings, lads and ladettes. It's Racket here. How are we all today? Excuse my throat; it's quite sore, but we're still going to continue with the episode anyway because we're on a 1 week drought of content. But the second episode of this series, Core Concepts. The first one being about the meta misconception, when I talk about the meta and what people think of it, what I think of it, comparing and contrasting. The second episode of this series will be called The Broken Delusion. Now, I'm going to be explaining what the broken delusion means. Now, what the broken delusion means, it's sort of in the context of the first episode, actually. But it's me elaborating and pointing out a few misconceptions. But yeah, a few delusions, if you will, like I mentioned in the title, of the meta and what people think is broken and what is actually broken. So, here is my example. Excuse me. There is a YouTube video, I believe it was the Complexity coach or analyst, saying that Sombra is quote-unquote broken, or is the new pick, and he also remained to say that the Torbjorn and Symmetra combo is very, very strong. Now, the reason why I disagree with this, no, I am probably not smarter than the Complexity analyst. He is on Complexity for a reason, but for me, this is my opinion. I believe it is valid. In order for something to be broken, it pretty much has to be validated and picked every game, and most likely in Overwatch, because there's so many people who play it, it's not going to be very likely that you're going to be the only team to pick that up. Especially Complexity, from what we've seen so far in the Overwatch esports scene, when they've not even been realised as a mid-tier team. They haven't really been digging it up too much in these tournaments that they've been entering, besides the most recent one. So, in order to make their opinion more valid, in order to, realise that if it's good or not, I think a very good introduction to what the meta can be and the most optimal way to play it is when the Overwatch Korean tournament starts. I believe it's called APAC or Apex. I always get confused between the two, because you have a few good teams there. You have the top tier NA/AU teams. So you have Envious, Fnatic, Misfits. You have really good teams, NRG, going into the tournament, bundled up with Koreans. Now, Envious, of course, won the last time, and they did a very good job. They honestly played at their best. They had a very good team for the meta, and they did a really good job. And in order for me to grasp what the meta is actually, what the actual meta is, and what teams are making use of it, I would go to that tournament because it is probably the highest level standard of play at the moment in Overwatch. I'm not going to judge it off an tournament that has, subpar NA teams and people can just play random shit and get away with it. That's not how I'm going to judge the meta, because that's too much of a small sample size. And I'm not going to say Sombra's OP because Complexity played it. Now, to put this into context, once again, Torbjorn Symmetra, I don't think it's very strong at all. If it was very strong, then you would see perhaps a 50 and above percent play rate, at least on the competitive scene, and to be considered as an option. It really isn't, honestly. It really isn't considered an option because it is hard countered by particular comps. You can run Pharah and Mercy, pocket the Pharah, take out the Torbjorn turret, and what are they going to do? It's not like the Symmetra can shoot up in the air with the beam. You can't do that. Because Pharah has a really good matchup into Symmetra, and if you are buffed up by Mercy, you can take out the Torbjorn quite easily. You take out the Symmetra turrets, easy. Pharah's done it all in one go, very easy to get through. You also grab a Winston for ground control in case there are any leftover turrets. There's several things that you can really do to puncture that comp. And sure, against badder teams, I can understand why it can work, because theoretically, it is one of the harder team comps to push through for a first point take control. Problem is that comp, again, if that point does get taken, you have to switch basically two heroes. You're not going to play Symmetra on the second point. I mean, depending on the map, but most likely you're going to switch Symmetra and you're going to switch Torbjorn. So that's going to give you an ultimate reset. You're going to have to switch up your team comp. It's just a pain in the ass, really, for what it is. And considering that considering that that's an option after you die, you have to switch over. Like that's not really worth, in my opinion. It's I think it's too risky. You rather run the standard team comp, but I can understand why teams, if they were thinking they were, the underdogs, they run that cheesy Torbjorn Symmetra comp. I can understand that basically. Or you want to catch someone out, or you've seen historically out good against Symmetra for some reason, then you can pick it. Go for it. I'm just saying it's not really strong and it's not broken. Okay. Broken is D.Va at the moment in the meta because she's picked in pretty much every single competitive match. I think that's pretty broken. The buff from D.Va allowed the triple tank meta to be here in the first place. That's pretty broken. Roadhog is currently being fixed because he was broken. He's getting hook rework, Hook 2.0, and the reason... Okay, so here's my definition of broken. For Overwatch, broken for me means that it needs to be fixed, right? It's not suitable in the game, and you would want the devs to nerf, fix it, whatever. Do you really think Torbjorn and Symmetra need to be fixed or buffed? Yes, well, to be honest, they need to be fixed. Especially Torbjorn, he needs to be buffed more. I mean, that's the best way I can put it. If someone says, hey, Torbjorn's broken, oh, he is, trust me. He needs to be buffed more, definitely. That's my response. But yeah, I mean, people seem to have variable criterias, and for someone to think that something's broken, and you have this tier list, and you're like, okay, Torbjorn, Symmetra, they're broken at the moment. Are you really comparing Torbjorn, Symmetra to the likes of Soldier, D.Va, and Roadhog and putting them in the same category? Because that doesn't make sense to me. Seriously. People need to adjust their criteria and say, okay, no, this is a strong team comp. It can be used in situations and explain when it can be used, why on such and such map, and explain the advantages and disadvantages. The Torbjorn Symmetra comp. Yes, it can hold the very first point well. It's honestly one of the most durable team comps, but it can be adapted to by the enemy team. It has a surprise factor. Pushing in first, the Torbjorn Symmetra team comp is most likely going to win because of that surprise factor. Now, the problem is that team comp, as I mentioned before, after losing that point, you have to switch out 2 heroes, which is a detriment to your team. It can be a problem. What else is I going to talk about? In terms of hero strength, when you look at play percentages, win rates, I think it's a reasonably good identification to see whether a hero is broken or not. Now, in Overwatch, it can be quite different, because of the skill sets that we are given. As I mentioned before, a good Genji from a bad Genji is definitely quite noticeable, and that's how the win rates, sort of get confusing. But if you were to filter the win rates at high elo, you'd notice like these sort of things, stuff like that. And the thing is, what was I even saying? You can't judge a hero just because you played one solo queue game against it. I've seen so many times when we're up against a Widowmaker, and I hear in game chat, "Oh my God, Widow's so broken." Like, no, she's not broken. What planet are you on? Like, I'm confused and mind-boggled as to how this person would say that Widowmaker is broken. Now, whether they actually mean it, or whether they want to say it, it's in the flame, sort of in the moment, in the heat of the moment, I can't obviously identify that. I mean, I've seen it several times, and obviously people can think differently, but it triggers me, sort of. Like, I remember in League of Legends, we had the same problem. I was a former League player. People would get killed by Teemo, and they're like, "Oh my God, Teemo's so busted. He's the devil of League of Legends." And I'm like, "No, he isn't. He's only good against one archetype, and that's right-click champions. And no one plays right-click champions in competitive, so Teemo's not going to be viable, is he?" Like, the same thing applies to Overwatch in that sort of sense. You need to realize the strengths, the weaknesses, what counters each and every hero. Because if that's the case, and you've just, for example, you play Junkrat all the time, Widowmaker might seem pretty broken to you because you can't reach her all the time. I can understand that, but don't scream in game chat and be like, "Oh, Widowmaker's broken, I don't understand." That's because you're playing Junkrat. Of course Widowmaker's gonna beat you. You don't have the range to deal with Widowmaker. These matchups and identifications people need to realize. I'm not saying you need to go on analyst level and know every in and out of every matchup, but you should generally know the context and you know what happens generally in your matchup. So who has the advantage in this fight? Simple stuff like that. You know, if you play a hit scan, you have a better job at taking out a Pharah than you would, you know, a Reinhardt or like a you know, heroes that can't exactly reach the sky. It's just common sense. If you're seeing a Pharah dominate, you're not going to pick Mei or like Junkrat or something like that. People should know this. Now, a lot of people do know this, but they decide to ignore it and they decide to keep on playing their hero, and then they complain and they're like, "Oh, it's broken." No, it's not broken. You just don't know, or you are negligent, arrogant, and you choose not to deal with it rather, and that is the problem. Now, we've talked a bit about the competitive side and esports, and we've talked a bit about solo queues, so it's time for me to wrap things up. We're reaching around the 11-minute mark. So, what I basically think, in order to summarize this whole video, make sure you, and I want to say this to everyone watching this, make sure you know what actual broken is. Now, I've said this before. If you think something is broken, that implies that the developers should buff it, or you think that it's not balanced, and if it's so not balanced, then it should be changed. Torbjorn Symmetra, they don't need to be they don't need to be nerfed, right? And even as a combo, it's the most overkill combo in the game. Like, oh, you can buff people up that have so much health. But Torbjorn doesn't really equivalent up to a hero who's that weak. You're just basing all of Torbjorn's power on his armor packs, basically. Otherwise, he's not very useful. Several things you have to take into consideration when you're analyzing these team comps, when you're analyzing the strengths and weaknesses of each individual hero, and as a player base, you know, as you need to realize this stuff. You know, go on Overbuff, go on Master Overwatch or something like that. Look at the win rates, look at particular heroes, look at counter matchups, look at the esports teams, and see what they pick up when, you know, they have a Pharah player that's going godlike. They would go McCree or Soldier or something like that, trying to knock them out in the air, maybe perhaps get a Zenyatta of the Discord orb. Realize how they adapt to these situations. Now, I'm not saying that every professional team necessarily does adapt to these situations well. I think a very good example was FaZe, when Shadowburn was just basically playing Genji all tournament for MLG Vegas. He was playing a bit of D.Va, but it was not at to the same standard or level of his Genji, and they got punished by Envious very hard in the finals. Now, just things like that. Just put them into context, analyze, don't filter through, or just filter through correctly in your mind, and don't judge the book off its cover. But yeah, once again, thank you guys for watching this episode. This is, what was the episode called? The Broken Delusion, or The Broken Illusion. I'm not sure whether which title will be used. I'm sure you'll see that in the description or the title. I'm not even sure what I'm just saying now. But once again, thank you guys for watching this video. We're nearing 100 subscribers, so once we hit the 100 subscriber mark, I'm going to make a special video for you all. Yeah, so thank you once again, everyone. I appreciate all the support. See you, ladies and gentlemen.